A very good evening to all the participants, Future of Architecture 2021. We will be starting the program at 4 p.m. sharp. We've got very overwhelming response today, more than 1,200 registrations, and we've got a lot of people coming in. So we'll be starting at 4 p.m. sharp with Christopher sir. Thank you. A very good evening to all the participants here, students, architects, teachers who have all come and be a part of the Future of Architecture 2021. I am extremely overwhelmed to invite all of you to this fantastic program. Future of Architecture 2020 happened last year when the pandemic started. It was actually under the topic to talk to students about eminent architects and their architectural practices. Now, today we are going to be talking about Future of Architecture 2021. The theme of this year is internships and jobs. One of the biggest doubts in the minds of many young architects, young students, and even big practices. They are all pretty skeptical about the way architecture has been shaping and the profession has been changing in the last 1 year. So this panel or this event has been planned in a way that we get to talk not about presentations, not about the works of architects, but about the practices and interview them with the questions that you've asked. I'm very happy to say that in the last few days, we have received more than 1,200 plus registrations for this entire event. Our Zoom is full and the YouTube live is also on. And we are very happy that this event has become such a big success. And I would like to also thank all the participants, all the colleges who've been a part of this. Now, Future of Architecture 2021 is actually hosted by RVS Chennai Padmavathy School of Architecture in association with Manipal University, Jaipur, and Sushant School of Architecture, Gurugram. Now, this event is an initiative of the students of RVS Chennai, and we are very proud that the event has taken such a large shape. Now, I would like to speak a few words about the host, RVS Chennai. RVS Chennai is also known as the Alternative School of Architecture. The reason why we name ourselves like that is because we want to shift the way we have been teaching our students. We want to make things more practical and we want to make things more hands-on. Just like how a Montessori system works, we want to change the way we've been looking at architecture education itself. And RVS Chennai has placed its architectural education base over 5 strong pillars. The first pillar being the School of Change, our approach to architectural education where students don't have to study but have to learn. They have to be more practical, they have to learn things more experientially, and a hands-on learning curve is what we tend to bring through the School of Change program. Each year has got an ideology, it's got a character, it's got a theme, and the School of Change promotes students to learn things in their own way and learn things in the most important, in the most relevant and innovative way. So that practical approach comes under School of Change. The second pillar we focus on is the live project. The reason why we call it live project is because students don't design under this pillar, but they actually involve themselves in the construction of a real-time project. They work as masons, contractors, carpenters, electricians, and involve themselves in building a real-time project for at least 3 to 4 weeks in one academic year. Every student of RVS would have definitely gotten his hands dirty in building a real-time project. The next pillar I'm going to talk about is called the Vertical Studio. RVS Chennai has got institutional collaborations with many institutions across the country and also globally. And this has helped us conduct successful student exchange programs between these institutions, where students from RVS also get to interact with other students and learn and conduct design problems. So this is a 1 week to 10-day program where they become quick thinkers, big fast team builders, and create innovative design projects and solve interesting design problems. The next pillar is going to be Summer Winter School. Summer Winter School is a travel-based program learning curve that we have created where students get to travel across the country, work with eminent architects, not just in the field of architecture, but also in the allied fields of architecture, and also follow their passion and follow their heart towards the fields of architecture that they love. This pioneering travel program has helped us cover so much parts in the country and work with interesting and innovative architects across the entire nation. The fifth and the most interesting pillar, which is very, very relevant today, is what we call the Finishing School. Finishing School is a program specifically designed for the students of RVS to be trained to make them industry ready, market ready, and most importantly, future ready. The idea of Finishing School is to bridge the gap between architectural education and architectural practice by making the students more equipped and understand their own passion into how they can career and shape their career and their future. Along with these 5 pillars, we have some interesting programs that we have. One of the programs is called the Travel Theme Studios, where in the first semester, an architecture student goes through a travel. There are 5 Tamil landscapes, Kurunji, Mullai, Marudam, Neidal, and Palai. And in this one landscape, a student goes through a detailed travel. The first travel in his architectural educational career is very important and very relevant. And we believe that this humbles and makes the students more prepared. And last year, we got the opportunity in this pandemic during that 1 month where we got opened up to travel again and conduct a travel theme studio under the topic called Mullai. So we have covered Kurunji, Neidal, Marudal, and Mullai, and we're very happy about it. And this travel theme studio has led for us to start another program in the last year called Vidai. the establishment of agriculture and architecture coming together. I can proudly say we are India's first architecture college to kickstart agriculture, not just as part of the campus, but to teach the students agriculture and make them experts in it. And in this 5 years of architecture, they are all going to be farmers, where they're going to get their hands dirty and they're going to understand the value that comes for the food they eat. And this is an important program we have created. Along with this, we have also created something called a life project, where students get trained under different circumstances to actually learn sustainable living. So our students were trained in Proto Village, a village in Andhra Pradesh, towards sustainable living. They undergo different kinds of training, just not physically, but also emotionally and mentally, and how they can approach and adapt themselves to different circumstances. And this life project experience in agriculture has kickstarted the Sustainable Nature Campus. Our architecture campus is going to be completely converted into a sustainable nature campus, showcasing every kind of architectural material that is sustainable, that is smart, and also socially relevant. And we believe our nature campus is a place where we just don't design, but our students get together to build. And this nature campus is not just for RVS, it's going to be opening up very soon to all the students who want to learn about smart and sustainable building construction. Along with this, what exactly we did in the pandemic is something that we kickstarted, something called Quarantine Gurukulam, an old school methodology that we brought back. When online was considered the new age, when everything becomes so, technology driven, we went back creating a Gurukulam online, which helps students learn multiple things. We had conducted a lot of different activities, engaging lectures, interesting ideas and innovations throughout this pandemic time for students to be engaged, to keep up their passion, to not lose the hope and be positive about architecture in a holistic manner. So Quarantine Gurukulam was an interesting initiative of our college in the last 1 year. And all of these activities that we have created, from the live project to Quarantine Gurukulam, is available and seen on our website for all the students to be a part of. We have also got the opportunity to kickstart a Center for Design and Innovation, South India's first center that is dedicated solely for the purpose of bringing together architectural institutions, architectural practices, and architectural firms and students. Now, the reason for this center is that we feel architects need a place to breathe, to explore, to talk, to really enjoy and interact and communicate. So we have created this exclusive center in Chennai called the Center for Design and Innovation, which is open to all public. So this is a small brief about what RVS does and what we do as an architectural institution. And getting back to today's event, I am very happy to have with us architect Christopher Charles Benninger, sir, one of India's most renowned architects. I kindly request sir to come on video and also on the audio, as I would like to read a small brief about, sir. I think architect Christopher sir does not need any introduction at all to all the students, teachers, and practicing architects. He has been an inspiration to many, and he has always been leading the way in various technologies and various ways. I would like to, give a small brief about sir. Christopher Charles Benninger, sir, is India's highly decorated architect, known for his multiple award-winning projects at Mahindra United World College, the Samudra Institute of Maritime Studies, the Sushant One Earth Headquarters, and so many more. Benninger, sir, studied urban planning at MIT and architecture at Harvard, where he later also taught. He settled in India in 1971, founding the School of Planning in SEP, Ahmedabad. He is also one of the 9 recipients of the Great Master Architect Award in India. I am proud to say that the number of awards that CCBA, Christopher Charles Benninger Architects, has received is so many, and I don't think this entire event would be, fitting in to give the list of everything. So I'm going to cut it short. But I also definitely have to say that Christopher Charles Benninger, sir, has been a very, very active academician. He's been constantly participating in academic panels, discussions with students across the country in multiple levels, and also globally renowned for his speech and for his talks. His also best-selling book, Letters to a Young Architect, has been translated to Gujarati, Chinese, and Bangla, and it's definitely a must-read for all the students and young practitioners. And I would like to invite Christopher Charles Benninger, sir, to the panel. And this event today is just not about sir talking about his works, but it's going to be a lot of different questions. In the last 3 days, we have received more than 100+ questions from all of you guys who have attended this event. And it has just made us so excited to feel that how is it possible? All the questions are very similar. They all have so many similarities. And at the same time, the active participation from all of you guys has made this event a huge success. So, sir, a very good evening to you. And I would, I'm very excited to have you on the panel. Thank you for accepting to be with us here, sir.
Well, it's lovely to be here. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, sir, I can hear you.
Okay,
I can hear you.
So we're fortunate. Today we have lovely weather here in Pune. It's not raining torrentially, so it's a bright sunny day. So it's nice to meet you on such a pleasant day.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. It's actually the same. I'm also very excited to have you on board. Actually, it's something that I never thought I would be able to do, just get to talk to you so easily. And I would like to thank your office people also. I think Ram sir is also there, all of you, for making this event entirely possible. So thanks a lot for accepting our invitation, sir.
Sure.
And we will directly be going on to asking the questions that we have received, in the last few days from so many architects. We have got questions from more than 100 plus architects, academicians, students, and also there are some students who are going to join architecture who had some doubts about you. So I'm going to start with the first question, which is a very personal question and a question that came from many architects. Why did you actually move to India, sir? We have heard that renowned architect B.V. Doshi sir is the one who invited you over to India. But how did that happen, and what exactly happened? Because that has been a question. You're an architect who came from a country, a very different country, and you contributed so much to the modern architecture of India. So why did you move, and what exactly inspired or happened for you to move back to India, sir, or move to India?
That's a very good question. You see, whenever I cross through Heathrow Airport, I see a lot of Indians boarding planes for America, and I'm the only one boarding a plane for India. And my conclusion after 50 years, the fools all went to America, and I was the smart guy who came to India. For one thing, India has always been kind of a frontier. When I came to Ahmedabad school, I came on a Fulbright fellowship, and I came because some of the professors I had at Harvard had worked with Doshi in Le Corbusier's office, and they recommended, if you want to go to India, why not go to Doshi? And so when I came to Ahmedabad, it was one of only 9 schools of architecture in the country, and we had maybe 15 to 20 students max in a class. So you can understand the architectural community in India was very small. And while I was in Ahmedabad, I think Doshi was a great storyteller and mentor. And he asked me to, for example, teach the students of architecture about urban planning, since I was at MIT at that time working on urban planning. So I started teaching for the first time in my life at SEPT, what was then School of Architecture. Then he asked me, why don't you take up a studio? Now that was exciting, because if I look back, the students I had in the first studio, which I taught, were people like Sirish Berry and Mickey Desai, Madhvi Desai, Casey Daroga, who started a number of schools of architecture like that. I had, in a very small group of students, maybe 12 to 15 students, I would say 5 or 6 future leaders in the profession. So the whole experience when I was here in 1968, 69 with Doshi was very exciting. And at that time I had made a proposal, why don't we start a school of urban planning at what is now SEPT? This was an idea that Bernard Cohn, who left Ahmedabad about the time I reached in 68, had talked about, but there was nothing put down in hard writing. So Doshi and I thought it was a good idea, and we made a proposal to the government of India, the government of Gujarat, to the Ford Foundation. And I was at that point offered a teaching job at Harvard University. So I left back to Harvard, where I became a tenured professor eventually after about 2 years. But about that time, Doshi was visiting Cambridge, and we talked about it. And at that time, the Ford Foundation said, look, we'll pay your salary if you come and start a school of planning. So it was more or less on a lark, just on an adventure. I said, okay, I'm 28 years old. My professors at MIT and Harvard said you would be an idiot not to go found a school of planning, postgraduate school of planning at age 28, because you're going to get older every year. And this is a wonderful opportunity. So I think there was a lot of mentoring by Doshi back then, a lot of encouragement, and we had big ideas. And those ideas kept on coming forward and forward. You see, when I was a student there in 1968, I said I wanted to do low-cost housing. And people said, well, the only person in Gujarat interested in low-cost housing is a social worker in Baroda called Sinat Mehta. So I wrote to him and he said, come and see me. He was a very simple gentleman riding a bicycle. And he was also kind of a labor leader with the ONGC workers there. And so we did a scheme, but it could never be built because it was on land which belonged to the municipal corporation, and nothing happened. But when I came back, in late 1971 and started working on the School of Planning, we had a war with Pakistan. And at that time, a group of politicians became very popular, including Senate Mehta, and elections were called, and he became the Minister of Housing. Now, friends and students and faculty, that's what's called good luck in life. You do free work for someone. You don't charge them anything. You work together as friends and try to solve a problem for poor people living in slums. And 4 years later, they become the Minister of Housing. And guess what? They call you and ask you to do. I did the first economically weaker section housing scheme in India, which is in Jamnagar. So that was a great break for me. And you see, getting that kind of break, by that time I was 29. I had just turned 29, and to have a break like that before age 30 and build maybe about 800 or 900 houses in Jamnagar was wonderful. And because I was building those houses in Jamnagar, the World Bank approached me and said, we have a huge project in Chennai, at that time Madras. Can you work with us on that? So I went down there and I said, listen, the people we're working for who live in hutments, they can't afford any housing at all. Low-cost housing is not the answer. We have to do site-in services. So from maybe 1973 to 75, we actually put up aligned about 15,000 plots, and we gave an opportunity to 15,000 families to shift into Arambakan, which is, you would all know, living in Chennai, and 2 other sites which we had, Villivakkam and some others. And we were able to give people a place where they could build their own homes. And they built much better homes on the land they owned, because they could buy those little plots of land, 300 and 400 and 500 square feet, for a 30-year loan, and they could then build houses, which they made very nice ones. Now you have 2 projects, and you're about 30 years old, and the next one was the Hyderabad Urban Development Authority. So you see what's happened. I came here to start a school of planning. I had very good mentors and gurus. I had Kanvindi, who also studied at Harvard. I had Anand Raje. I had Hasmukh C. Patel. So I was surrounded by people who were very encouraging and very helpful people. And one project led to the other, and I could never leave. And as I said, I think people who went to America were the fools, and I was the smart guy who first came to India overland. In 1971, I came overland from London to Bombay, and that was an exciting trip also. So the whole thing has been exciting. It's been like an overland trip to India since the last 45 years or 50 years.
Thank you, sir. I think, 1 minute. Am I audible?
Sure.
Yeah.
I can hear you.
Sir, this question has bin very inspiring, because you've said something that many young architects have a issue with, basically about how friends and the entire family around the design fraternity has helped your career in a very interesting way. And the next question that I had in mind was also in the same lines, but I have to definitely say, you said that you didn't get time to go back, but what is your feeling personally? So did you ever feel or regret, okay, why didn't I go back? Or was there ever a feeling like that for you? Did you feel like that at some point or no?
No, I didn't quite get your question. I saw a question in writing which was put up.
Yeah. That question is coming next, sir. I just wanted to ask, do you, you're very happy being in India. So do you want to go back, or do you want to be in India, sir?
Oh, I would never go back. That would be ridiculous. I mean,
because
see,
yes, sir, yes.
India is still a frontier. There are huge issues in front of us now. In this century, the Le Corbusier is going to be an Indian, one of our students. One of our students is going to become the famous architect who turned everything upside down, who said, Christopher Benninger, you were wrong. In the 20th century, you guys didn't understand the problem. And we understand the problem. We are going to design urban environments which are people-friendly, which have human spaces and connectivity, which have site-in services, communities where people build their own houses. I could even see a city which would be called self-help city. And one youngster in this audience might become the genius who comes up with a concept of a self-help city, which is integrated with skill development and manufacturing. There are all kinds of things we can do here. Transport planning is just getting underway, all kinds of things. We need to do a lot of work in primary education across the country. Who's building those schools? No one. everybody can go out and do that. We need basic health facilities, primary health centers and sub-centers in rural area. All of these are untouched by what you call branded architects. And I think there's such a huge opportunity lying out there. I wish I was 20, 21 years old and unemployed, and I know what I would do.
No, so that the reason why I had to ask that was there is a big aspiration for many youngsters that they feel that there is more opportunity abroad. I would want to go abroad and learn. I would want to go away. So that is why I had to ask that line straight. And you said clearly, no, you would not want to do it. And you said you want to be, you know, an unemployed youngster again back in the city. I think that is something that many is very inspirational for me as well, because we tend to mostly look beyond the opportunities right next to. So thank you, sir.
Let me expand on that. Going abroad means basically going to America. It means doing a 1 or 2 year postgraduate degree. It means paying at Harvard $50,000 a year and another 1,000 or 2 a month living costs, coming out of your degree owing 30 or 40 or 50 lakhs of rupees, having to live like a student for another 2 or 3 years to pay back that money. So you're trapped first to do your studies and next to pay back the loan. And then you say, I've been in America for 5 years and I've never afforded a car or a fancy music system. Why should I go back to India now, just when I've got all my debts paid? So I'm going to buy a car and I'm going to rent a nice apartment and I'm going to buy all kinds of junk for the apartment. And again, back they go into debt and they never come back to India. They finally marry an NRI boy or girl they over there. And they settle in the suburbs and they become the American babus. You see, it's a dead end. It's a beautiful dead end. Many people may like to have what I would call a beautiful dead end. You become a middle-class consumer and you're in debt your whole life and you happily live for happily ever after in the suburbs of America. Well, best of luck, guys, but I think India is much more exciting.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I think that was very interesting. Now I'll move on to the second question today, which is actually one of the facts that I studied and I myself didn't know about it. You were one of the pioneers in the country to kickstart the sites and services scheme in the country. And I think many of the people who are listening now will not know that one of the first sites that was done in the country is in Madras, in an area called Arumbakam. So there was also a report that was done about Arumbakam 20 years later. How was it accepted and received then? And do we have such projects being floated today or such discussions of livelihood happening? Or are we completely overlooking a particular sector of people? This is a question that's come from academicians and also from practicing architects, because now architects doing such projects in the overall look seems very less. So that is a question, sir.
See, listen, this whole site and services adventure, let me call it, it started when I was maybe 18 or 19 years old. My father was starting a school of management in Medellin, Colombia. So I used to visit in Christmas breaks and things like that. I used to go down to Medellin and I had friends in Bogota who were my fellow students. And when I was walking around Medellin, I noticed that actually people were living in barrios like hutments on the hillsides in very dilapidated, chaotic settlements ruled by desperados and criminals. And I was shocked to find this, because the city itself was laid out by the Spanish with a cathedral on a town square and the government offices all around that and beautiful arcades. So I had two cities, one next to the other. I had the official city, which was a kind of Spanish colonial town. And then I had the people living on the mountainsides. So this stuck in my mind. And when I finally went to Harvard, I had to do a thesis. And I was fortunate to have a man called Yerzi Sultan running my thesis studio. And I told him I'm going to take a thesis of self-help housing. And he said, well, that's not really what we do at Harvard. We do high art. We've had our students include I.M. Pei and Frank Gehry. And, a thesis should be some monumental building or some wow kind of gee whiz stunt. So I said, no, I'm going to do this. And I caught hold of a very famous person in the participatory planning movement, John F.C. Turner. And I did a thesis. Believe it or not, my thesis at Harvard was self-help housing. And it was very well accepted because this was something nobody thought about before. And then the next year, I was at MIT, and then I came, as I said, I came out to India on a Fulbright. So one thing sort of led to the other. And fortunately, I did this project in Jamnagar, and nobody else was doing any work for HUDCO, which had just been started in 1972. So I was doing the first HUDCO economically because section housing project. Some guys from Washington came to Delhi and they said, we want to see what India is doing in low-cost housing. So the government said, well, go meet Christopher Benninger in Ahmedabad and he'll take you to Jamnagar and show the project. So my project was the only project they could see, you know, so it was almost a default setting. So they came and saw my project and said, hey, here's a guy, a young guy, he's building, you know, 800, 900 houses, now, very small houses, about 200 to 300 square feet each. So why don't we get him down to Madras? So things fell into place and I had a wonderful team in what was called the MMRDA. The chief planner was Mr. Dattatri, and there was Lakshman, who was one of these self-made architects from a draftsman. He became an architect with a diploma, and they worked with me, very supporting people. And it was something which I think we all got so excited about that we could, you see, when I came there, they had planned on concrete houses with a sloping roof with one wall share between the 2 meters of concrete blocks. And then there was a living room, bedroom, kitchen, and toilet. And this house was actually a lower middle class house. I mean, even today, if you could buy a house on a plot like that with one shared wall, it would be something all of us would grab. So I said, this isn't low cost housing at all. This is just unaffordable by anyone. Let's do no cost housing. And everybody jumped on that idea, including in Washington, the World Bank. So this was not the first self-help housing project in India. It was the first self-help project that the World Bank took on, and it became later what they call decadal program. For 10 years, the World Bank was pushing self-help housing in every place, I mean, in Africa, even in Pakistan and Indonesia. And it was a lot of fun, and it kept growing and growing. Even today, Tamil Nadu still has a scheme, self-help housing. So frankly, there was no resistance. I think if you have a good idea, people jump on good ideas. When I was doing the capital plan of Bhutan, the chief town planner, Megharaj Adhikari, told me, this is a good plan, and everybody's going to claim that they did the plan. I said, why? He said, see, a bad plan becomes an orphan. Nobody claims to be the father. But if you do a good plan, everybody's going to jump on and claim that they did the plan. So this is the kind of thing that happens. You know, if you're lucky, people jump on board and they say, this is a great thing, and let's all do it together. So that was something which was very exciting, and it led to other projects. In fact, it led to the Hyderabad Urban Development Authority, our large project in Yusuf Guda for about 2,000 class 4 workers. And when we started that project, I told Mr. Bawa, who was the chairman, see, I don't want a fee for this. I'm starting an institute in Pune called the Center for Development Studies and Activities. I would like you to give me 25,000 rupees a month until my fees are paid, which would take me through 4 or 5 years. And I said, with 25,000 rupees, at that time, a director of an institute earned 1,200 rupees. That was me. And I could start an institute of 5 people with master's degrees who were very interested in development. And we actually started CDSA using the monthly increments that we received for the project in Hyderabad. So all of these things, it's like a domino, one falling over and pushing on the other one. You start with something good and keep working at it, and make sure it's socially relevant, make sure it's solving a problem. And I think it just keeps going on and on and on. So I would encourage the youngsters, the students in these various schools of architecture participating today, think of working with NGOs, think of working with voluntary agencies, think of working with social workers, and don't worry about how much salary they can pay you or what. They will allow you a lot of freedom. And there are many things you can do in small towns in India, in rural areas. Look at the problems, go visit some schools, go visit some basic health facilities and work with them, and you'll be surprised. Some of you will become very famous for the work you do.
Thank you, sir. Actually, the second part of the question that I wanted to ask was, but you've addressed that question. I'm just mentioning it because I wanted to insist on it. Many people avoid from joining these NGOs and working in rural areas or doing projects. But did you have a plan, to create such a large establishment, or do you have a vision? There is always a dream for every architect. I want to start a big office. Did you ever assume that you would have such a large establishment and a large office when you kickstarted your projects in India in a different scale altogether?
No, I never wanted a large office. I tell my colleagues here that the day we go across 50 people, that includes the staff, includes the architects now, I prefer about 30 architects. And then I can know people's faces. I know which city they come from, which school they studied in, who their parents are, what they're thinking. I feel sorry when I meet my friends. I won't mention their names. They're very close friends, but they have 200 employees, 300 employees, 700 employees. And I wonder, my God, when they walk into their office, they won't even recognize the people passing them at the door. And I think this is not what I want to do in life. I don't want to run a large company. I could have taken a job in the World Bank, or stayed at Harvard, where we used to have a very small number of students, and now there's more than 1,200 students in the GST. So even at the GST, you wouldn't recognize all the students anymore. We're studying there. I like a medium-sized office, big enough to solve problems, a lot of skills, but small enough that everybody knows each other, and it's like a big family.
So the next question is from Young Practices, which has come to us. The question is, in the current situation of the pandemic has taught all of us to work from our homes, and we have survived. Do you think architects still need a workspace with all its overheads and maintenance? Or do you think I don't need an office? I can actually work from my home and still do better design? Which is your preference, sir, for these young minds?
See, let me tell you one thing. Architects, when they started, always worked from home. Most of the young people who left my studio and started their own practices, they started them where? In an extra bedroom. Maybe they had a 2-bedroom flat, and they started it in one of the bedrooms. And if they have a small practice, it's completely possible to run an architectural practice out of your house, out of your apartment. But when you begin to get more people and you're taking new people on, you need to interact with those people. And then clients want to come and see you in your office to see what kind of environment you live in. So I think the office you work in is kind of if you pardon the word, a branding element. It speaks about your taste. It speaks about what you believe in. So I think once you pass a 5 or 6 people's office, if you get up to 15, you need an office. You need a place to work, which is not a domestic place, which doesn't have a baby crying in the next room, or doesn't have, if you're a woman, doesn't have your husband bitching about tonight's dinner. You've got to be in your studio and think studio. So I think when you're young and small, or if you want to stay young and small, I know architects who even in their 60s could work from home, but I think we need to work with people, look them in the face and look at drawings and discuss drawings with them right across the table. Of course, we could always continue working on the web. We started working, we closed down in middle March last year. And by July 1st, we started working again. And because we started working again, we could win a couple of competitions. And unfortunately, because of the virus, we even had to let people go. But by January, we already hired another 4 or 5 people. And recently, we hired about, another 8 or 9 people. So we're adding more people now, and I can talk about that later. How do we select people? That's another process. But I think we're hiring people because we're working in a studio. If we were working from home, maybe we'd subcontract work for people. How about that? You don't even have to hire them. You say you do this, I give you so many rupees for each drawing you do. I think we don't want to live in that kind of world. And if you work, it was okay to work for 6 months or 9 months from home. But I think most people I'm talking to, there's a fatigue taking place. There's a internet digital work fatigue. People are getting tired of it. And see, one of the reasons we work isn't just to become an architect or to earn a salary. We like people. We animals are a social community. We like to talk to people. We like to make friends in the studio. We like to argue with each other and discuss ideas. Now, that really happens in a very different way on the net. I think another question which somebody asked, we'll come to it later, is what is the impact of the digital world on our lives? Well, if we want to turn our studios into that same digital world, I think we all know what the answer is. It's going to become very superficial. So my answer is
yes, sir, thank you.
It's yes and no.
Yeah, I understand, sir. Actually, many young practices have always had a story of starting from a very small place.
Let me make one point. See, what has changed for us, I think, is that we have international clients, and we have clients in Bangalore, clients in Hyderabad, Bombay, Lucknow, and Bhubaneswar. Now, once a week, for example, we have a conference with our client for whom we're doing one of the largest brain research laboratories in the world. And our laboratory consultants are in Germany, and one of their experts is in Australia. And we're working with a large team, so we can all go on a Zoom call. And this is something, frankly, we were doing Zoom calls on this project before, but the complexity of the calls now with people from maybe 4 different countries at a time, and it all works very well. So I think that's a new thing. You need to work in a studio, but your team comes into this room where I'm sitting, and 4 or 5 people come around the table. We're doing the metro system for the Tatas and Siemens here in Pune. We're doing 23 metro stations. Now, there are 20, when we have our weekly meeting with the Metro 3, there are 22 people in those meetings, and some of them are at Siemens in Germany, some are with Tata Projects in Bombay, all kinds of experts in MEP and safety equipment, et cetera, meeting at one time every week. And for exactly half an hour, it's very tightly organized, and it's a wonderful way to work on a project. But the people working with me are working here in the studio. So it's a balance which is evolving.
Yeah, I understand, sir. I think that balance is very essential. And as young practices, the next question is about very, very straight. There was a question that came from many young practitioners, but I'm going to be putting it very blunt and straight. How do we charge for a project? How do I charge for a project? Or how do we charge for a project?
Before this meeting started, I talked to Ramprasad, one of my directors, and we were saying, to run a good project, you need to pay your consultants about 1% of the cost of the project. That is your structural designer, your MEP people, even sometimes you need specialists for kitchens or specialists for certain types of air conditioning for laboratories. So your consultants play a very big role, and the quality of your consultants is very important. If you undercut and underpay consultants, you're headed for doomsday. So 1% goes right there. Then to run your own office, you need another 2%. There's no way you can run a professional office without spending at home every month. We spend about 60 lakhs a month, just minimum. If we're earning less than 60 lakhs a month, we're going in debt, and we're starting to spend our savings. So we need a cash flow. Then there should be something called a profit or savings. Otherwise, if you don't make a profit, how do you buy new software? How do you buy new equipment? How do you manage becoming state of the art? And you see, we have so many clients who, like the Zen University, which is Wipro, and Tata's, we're doing the Tata Institute for Fundamental Research. We can't use fake software with TCS and Wipro, because they're the first people who will say, hey guys, we've got a little machine here that tells us every drawing you're sending, whether it's on legal AutoCAD or not, or whether it's on Rivet, or whether it's a stolen Chinese Rivet. No? So I think that it's very important that you have a profit. Now, what's going on? We found, for example, in Trichinopoli, the IIM campus, they ran a competition where they said, you do a building program for the IIM. You tell the space program. You calculate everything, how much it will cost. You bid on this, except you can't charge for air conditioning. I found that very funny in South India. And that could be 300 rupees a square foot back then. So that you're supposed to do free. And then they said, you give us a detail, you give us the building program, you give us the BOQ, you give us the cost, and then you tell us what is your fee. And that same fee has to be good for 20 years now. So I wrote to the director who I knew from another project, and I said, would Ratan Tata do a nano? And he started selling it, let's say a lakh and 50,000 rupees a car. Would he say that price is good for 20 years? Are you guys seriously going to teach management like that? And you want architects to guarantee a fee for 20 years? And then whoops, up pops in Andhra Pradesh, in Tirupati, an IIM. First, I'm sorry, IIT. That was an IIT in Tirupati. The first budget was 700 crores. Guess what? The winning office bid 1%. The office who took that project charged 1%. Now, we could go on and ask, how does that happen? And I'll tell you my theory. Well, you can't run a project on 1%. You can only run a project on 1% if you're in cahoots with the engineer in charge and you're selecting a contractor together. And the three of you make what in government construction is called a ring. And in the ring, the three of you work together and work out who gets how much money. So I'm sorry to say, this is what's happening at a very high level. Big projects, IIMs, IITs, the government is looking for L1, the lowest fee, and people in government are saying, why are architects doing such terrible buildings? Because they're not paying architects. Even the contractors are L1. So when you have an L1 architect with an L1 contractor and a lot of cahootsing going on in taking the measurements on site and juggling the bills around, what do you think is going to happen? You're going to have bad architecture and you're going to have a bad society. So I think wherever you see people talking about fees, I think the Ambedkar University in Delhi, somebody bid, I don't know, 1.3%. And then the minister said, why can't that come down to 1%? And the guys in charge of the project said, because we're following a procedure, a government procedure. After we've awarded this for 1.3, we can't negotiate down to 1%. So this is what's happening, and it's a very bad thing. On the other hand, if an architect wants to do it, we recently did a free project for a very large hospital in Pune as our contribution to the war on the virus now. So Sushant Hospital has a campus which dates back to the really 1860s, 50s, and it's a mess. 2 million square feet, at least 500,000 square feet was unhygienic, falling apart. And we said, our contribution is we're going to work with the doctors there, and we're going to completely do an audit of all the facilities, the connectivity between them, and we're going to redo the whole thing. So, but then we were on the top of the horse at that time. We weren't being framed into charging less fees. So if an architect decides to charge less fees for a certain project or charge nothing, I think that's okay. But if you're blackmailed by clients, I would never do a project for 1%. I mean, that's pure nonsense. No? And I think even our Council of Architecture should be monitoring this kind of thing, especially when we can have members of parliament ask, okay, for IIMs and IITs, give us the names of the architects and the IIMs and IITs and tell us how much fees they're charging officially on paper. And I think whoever asked this question, it is the question to ask, because young architects are going to come out now and people are going to exploit them. They're going to say, do work free, do work for 0.5%, and it's going to be a big mess. So to me, that's one of the big challenges that we all have to face together. And when you're charging 1%, what are you paying the guys in your office now? What kind of facilities are you giving them? I think it's all heading towards a disaster. Yeah, generally we charge 5%. See, like at IIM, Calcutta, we charge 5%. At IIT, we charge 5%. But the funny thing was at IIT, we charged 5%. We had a very good director, Professor Desai, but he went to a national meeting after about a year, and everybody said, why are you paying 3 architects you have working on this project? We were doing 50% of it, and then there were 2 other firms. Why are you paying 5%? We're paying 1%, 2%, and 3%. Why are you doing that? So then he came back and he said, guys, can we all sit together and can we reduce the fee? So we said, okay, just, because you're under pressure, we went from 5% to 4.5%. Now, the funny thing is the people who are paying us even 5.5% and 6%, because they have sites which are in isolated places, are like the Dalit community in Maharashtra pays us 5.5% if we work in a very isolated place now. A lot of social workers say, what is it going to cost you to move out there and camp in this site, et cetera? They pay even more than 5%, which we're hesitant to take. But I must admit that in 2 or 3 projects, we've taken 5.5 because the projects were going to be long drawn out and our resources are going to get stretched. So I feel as if all of we architects stick together and even form a cartel and say that we are all charging the same fees, things will work out. But if we're going to start competing with each other on fees, I think then that's not architecture. That's not a profession. Another thing, why architects are paying GST of 18.5%? Do you think lawyers are paying 18.5%? Do you think accountants are paying 18.5%? The answer is they're paying nothing. our profession somehow has the wrong reputation, the wrong image in government. Underpay, over taxes. I just don't understand what kind of image we projected. Okay.
Yes, sir. Okay. Yeah. Actually, this question came in multiple ways, and I think you've addressed all the different, perspectives in which the question was asked. Because we had the same question from so many firms. How do I tackle the problem? How do I handle this? When I'm charging a project and I want to give a correct services for it, and there are also people who are charging more than the 5%. So I think the answer has been very elaborate, and definitely would hit a point to many of the architects. And
one more point. See, if we hired a friend of mine, Manipal Fumihiko Maki, he was asked to design the Bihar Museum. Do you think they bargained with him on fees and said, we'll pay you 3%, 4%, 5%? No, they paid him 15%. So the government of Bihar, who would pay Bihari architects in Patna 2%, they're ready to pay an international architect 15%. And the same thing happened when I was chairman of the committee to select architects in Amravati. We went through a big circus there where some of the politicians tried to get kickbacks from the architects now. And finally, they hired Norman Foster, which I said, that's the only way to go now, because we had a dead end where even they wanted a film director to design the capital city. So finally we got Norman Foster in, and of course he didn't charge anything less than 10%. So it's interesting, our politicians, our leaders, our IAS officers, they're all ready to pay some, pardon me, I'm a white-skinned person, but they're ready to pay a white-skinned foreigner 3 times, 4 times what they pay their own people. And I think that's obnoxious. That's not acceptable.
Thank you, sir. I think it's something very eye-opening, and the details you gave very frankly was very inspiring. I think it can set standards to the young practitioners of how they should handle such a crisis and such a discussion. So I'll go on to the next question. This question is very relevant to the economics of an architecture office. Again, there is a missing link in live training and mentoring of today's generation architecture students by architects' offices. That is creating an extra pressure on institutions. How can it be solved from an academician and a practicing architect side? I will just elaborate on this question. The idea is many architecture firms used to take up internship as a mentoring process, but with the economic pressure that they handle, the mentoring has completely died down, and institutions are not able to fill that gap of giving the practical exposure to the students, which they enjoy in architects' offices. And how do you think young architects' offices can handle this crisis, because they are not able to spend time with the interns or with the younger architects to mentor them? They are using the skills of the students as an added bonus, but they are not able to spend this time, and the institutions are also facing the grunt of not being able to mentor the students. So how do you think?
Let's do one thing. Let's start with the institutions. Now, we try to take 4 or 5, 2 times a year, let's say five trainees. Now, do you know that I think, except for maybe SEPT and 2 or 3 others, that lovely college outside of Chandigarh, the institutions let the students write. The institutions don't write to you and say that, even after you accept the students, they don't write and say that this is our program, thank you for taking the student. And then there should be an attached sheet saying, if you're going to mentor our students, these are places where we don't teach. And maybe you could mentor them more strongly in these areas in your office. No, there's not a word from the colleges. They take a fee from the students. Mind you, they're charging people who are in our office being quote unquote trained by us, and they're charging a fee back at home. And there's not even a professor hired to write to us and say, thank you for taking the student. And there's no one who writes to us. It could be a standard email which says, these are 10 things we would like our students to get exposed to. We would like them to go on a site with a senior architect and see what kind of things he looks at. We would like to have some guidance on how to do working drawings. Most of the students who come to my studio, they don't know how to dimension a drawing. They'll put center lines column to column, but they won't put room dimensions. And they'll put all of the dimensions inside of the drawing where you can't see anything. And we have to teach them how to do dimensioning, always to put a north arrow, and don't put fancy, jazzy lettering. This is not a disco, it's a technical drawing. So my problem starts with the institute. It used to be, I remember JNTU used to visit. Now that sounds complicated. If you've got 80 students in training, maybe it's not possible anymore. But JNTU faculty used to visit each of the offices where their students were doing training to get a feedback and see, to me, at the end of it, what kind of feedback should the schools want? They should want feedback, not whether Mr. Mahesh was a good trainee or not, and was he good at speaking and in his behavior, etc. They should ask, what are the things that he did not know that you think he should have known from the school after 3.5 years of education? What are the things you found we could improve on? So this is how I see it, that there's a lack of even communication. I think another problem is if it's not COVID time, if it's not heavily raining, we get at least once a week a busloads of kids who come from different schools of architecture. They come here to India House and we meet them and talk to them and they look around. Now, when I talk to the people teaching them, they've never worked in a studio. How do you like that? They've got a PhD, they've got a master's degree from some fancy foreign university, but they've never worked in a studio. Now, there's something wrong when we have teachers who actually never worked in a studio. Maybe they did training when they were a student, or maybe they worked for 6 months, but the people teaching don't have studio experience, they don't have site experience. Now, I think we need to work together, the institutes and the private practices, and see how can we bridge that gap.
So you have to be a little bit more louder. Okay. Project your voice a little louder. Not getting messages, your voice is loud. Be a bit louder, okay?
Can we move this?
You bend forward, that will reach fast.
Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me, sir?
I can hear you.
Yes,
Can you
sir.
hear
Actually,
me?
this is yeah, I can hear you, sir. I can hear you. I was just talking about, I just got unmuted. Now, the kind of point that you put forward, why institutions have to set some part apart. What about the role of firms, sir? Do you think firms are doing justice to the interns that they are coming in? Because many students have written to us saying we are being used by architecture firms just for the skills that we have, not for the skills we do not have. And that is, definitely the institution should take something from this, being able to interact with the students throughout the internship and the offices. But what about the role of architecture firms? Because an institution cannot do what a firm does.
See, what I think is that when you come for work, a youngster comes to work in a studio, you learn by doing. You learn by working in a team, and you're doing work on a real project for the first time. And keep in mind, most of the work you're doing is in highly technical problem solving. And you're doing that on a computer, probably through the method of drawing. I think the way students can be made more part of the thing is they should be allowed to attend maybe Zoom calls with the clients. They should be allowed to do site visits with the senior architects and see what's happening on site. I think these kinds of things are needed, but keep in mind, why are you coming to a studio? You picked up skills in your school. You've learned some basic, maybe Rivet and maybe AutoCAD and maybe even some fancy Lumia or 3D, but you've never applied that to a real problem. Now, it's like a dentist, he studies in a dental school and he doesn't think he's going to go as a trainee into a hospital and get lectures on dentistry. He's going to actually start working on patients' mouths now. And that's, to me, scary, because I remember when I started working with an architect named Jose Luis Serra. He had 60 people in his studio, one big studio on one floor of his building. And we had to just sit in and we had to start doing real drawings. And those drawings were going to be put out where contractors were going to be using them to build buildings. And to me, that's the scary part for a young person. He should be using his skills, and he should be bringing most of those skills. He should have some rudimentary knowledge of those skills before he joins the studio as a trainee. Now, we find many students who come, they come with skills which our older guys don't have. And I think that's where we have a nice symbiotic relationship. If we're making a particular presentation, somebody pops up and says, I can do a fancy kind of walkthrough, which can be plugged into the middle of the presentation. So to me, it's working by doing, and it's doing things which are needed. It's not that an architectural studio could have a curriculum. We could have a curriculum and say that students come here, we're going to put 5% on site visits, and we're going to put 5% on Zoom calls with clients. These kind of things that could be done. And maybe schools could even give a hint by sending a letter, at least one letter to the studio saying, it would be nice if our students at least sat in 2 or 3 client meetings. It's so easy now because the client meetings are on calls like this. So I think it's a two-way street. It's not, I don't think that students are getting exploited any more than I'm also getting exploited by my clients. So I don't actually see that as a problem. In our studio, people just jump in and they start working together. But we do give them some lectures. Our engineer gives some lectures on the process of tendering and quoting and all of this kind of stuff. And I spend a lot of time at my age telling stories to the young students of projects we worked on, et cetera. And the students tell us that's what we like. We like to hear about stories with clients, stories with construction sites, how things actually happened. So yeah. I think, we have to put it in writing. Schools need to sit down, maybe a couple of schools together and say, this is what we want out of 6 months of training. And we should also inform. See, we had some students join us 2 weeks ago, and after they got started and I got each one of them working on something with me, by the end of the first week, I gave them each something where we would work together. And on Monday, I said, hey, where are my 2 trainees? Oh, don't you know Pune University has a 4-day sort of examination. And I said, well, wait a minute, I gave them work to work on a design with me. I can't wait 4 days for them to come back. Nobody from the institute side or even the students told us that they had to go for 4 days of I don't know what it was, Bible voice or something. And this is where there's a lack of communication. And keep in mind, architects are very, very busy people. They don't have time to play around. So I think it's a question of let's have a solution that your school and the other schools on this team, they work out at least a 1-page Word document that says, we would like our students when they come on training to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 experiences. And can you try to give them all these experiences? Maybe you can't give all 10, but you can give maybe 5 out of 10.
No, definitely, sir. I think that's something that we as an institution also learned today from you as to what is expected, and it's essential. I think it's definitely helped us now. I think we'll move on to the next question, which is all very nicely connected to each other. Your firm in all the projects from the beginning to now has always integrated technology and elements of Indian architecture in various ways. What is your opinion about softwares, which you just mentioned that many young students are being able to do, Lumion or walkthroughs or renderings? What is your feel about these softwares that came into the field of architecture, especially in the last few years? There is a plethora of softwares that's being brought in, and so many presentation tools and techniques that's driven. What do you think has happened, or how do you feel about it, these softwares?
Okay. That's a good question. Because in my life, there are 2 interesting things. I don't know AutoCAD, confession, because I believe that you cannot design on software. I design on sketches and what I call diagrams. And if you talk to most architects who are good designers, they do sketches. And these are not pretty pictures of a rural scene with a building in the middle of it. These are diagrams of how the MEP is going to work, how the structure is going to work, and different colors maybe for structure and MEP and functions, et cetera. So I have a whole system of analysis that I go through when I get a new project. And some of it can be done on the computer, some of it can't. But first thing I want to say before we talk about computers and software, every student needs to know how to freehand sketch. And I don't mean like Picasso or M.F. Hussein or something. I mean to do diagrammatic sketches of the site. What are the setbacks? Where are the entry points? Where quiet functions go, noisy functions, bubble diagrams, stuff like that. So they need to do architectural sketching, not artistic sketching. Then they can go into software, because once you have a sketch, you can put it on the software, SketchUp or something, and you can even start looking at it in 3D. So I think the trouble is there's no balance between the manual mind working and the software. Now, so my confession is that I don't even know AutoCAD myself. I do sketches. My other confession is I think I had the first computer in Maharashtra. In 1983, I bought a Hewlett-Packard machine, and I had one of my colleagues, Nikita Oak, he's teaching here in Pune now after coming back from America. In 1983, he was an idiot, you know. He sat down and learned how do you type. To draw a line, you had to type start at point A12 and move so many inches to the right, and then you got one line, and then you had to come down 9 inches and do the other line, and that was called a wall. So he worked in very rudimentary pioneering software, and that was enough to scare me away from computers. And then I think we got a Chinese young lady working for us in maybe 1998 or something, who was just fantastic on computers and software. And she actually came for her interview carrying a desktop, you know. I mean, they used to have big boxes, and the screen was quite a heavy thing. And she came in and did the interview, and I was so impressed. I think the next week we bought three desktops, and we said, okay, who's interested in working on computers now? And so we jumped into that because we were doing the Cochin refineries, and it was a multi-story building. And we realized there was a lot of repetition. We wouldn't have to draw the floors completely every time again. But it took me a while because basically I would be so happy to walk around my studio and look on the desktop and see drawings, but I have to go look at a screen. And in case they can blow up the screen and they can show a site which is 100 acres, or they can blow it down and they're working on a toilet in 100 square feet. And to me, that's not the way that a person who's trying to guide people and mentor them looks at drawing. So I always tell them, let's meet every day, take a printout, bring the printout to my desk, let's sit down and we'll sketch on top of the printout. Because I find talking about design and details on a computer where you have different colors for different things, that maybe it's my age, but I think computers have a big role to play, maybe 85%, but it's like the steering wheel of the system is a freehand sketch. And maybe everything else in the car runs on the computer, but damn it, you better know how to steer the car. And that you do with sketching. So I'd say yes, but I also think that people get carried away with software. They think if they know Lumia, that's design. No, that's just representation. It's just a kind of a tool for representing things. So again, the teachers, the mentors in the studios have to tell people, have a balance now. Have a balance between what you can do with your hand and your mind and what you can put mechanically onto a computer screen.
Yeah, thank you, sir. And I think we had a very interesting reaction from a lot of people who were attending when you said you did not know AutoCAD. So that was that's actually very surprising. It's also very interesting for me to know that you've always worked with so many technological projects. Many of your projects are also very technology oriented in terms of the energy savings and in terms of the consumption. And many architects have also felt that technology is something that we need to be in line with, because the buildings have to evolve in current context. So it's nice to get there. And I'm just going to continue another question on the same lines, which is directly about one of the speeches that you gave in SEPT about the design. So this is a nice quote that we got as a question. Your speech in SEPT was quite viral even on social media. How do you see this response on social media? Because you had mentioned that it actually motivates you as a speech and had reached a large audience. But isn't social media also storming too much information into our minds within too little time? What is your opinion on this, specifically about social media?
I want to answer this question. I think it's very interesting. But on the last question, I want to say one more thing. See, it's true,
yes,
it's true that I don't know AutoCAD. But for example, when I designed the Forbes Marshall factory, which is 110 meters by 110 meters, I drew and designed every one of those steel trusses myself on my desk. I use computers by getting a line out. Like I would sketch a section and say, now let's draw the basic things so that I have a piece of paper, and I would draw all the trusses, all the connections between the trusses, and then we would put them on the computer. So it's not that I sit down and I'm just daydreaming and something's happening on the computer. It's back and forth. So now let's go from there to the social media. Okay, can you hear me? Are you there?
Yeah. Yes, sir. I'm there, sir. I'm there, sir. I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, good. See, now you're mentioning CEPT. That was fun because, you know, CEPT is a community, and Dr. Bimal Patel had taken over the Institute. And very frankly, let me tell you, when he took over the Institute, there were big financial problems. We had some faculty, one faculty member, for example, had 30 private employees working in the facilities, and we didn't have enough space for faculty and for students. And we had wires hanging all over the place. And we had a lot of faculty who were above 65, about 10 people, and they had all the senior posts. And actually, it was illegal to employ those people on permanent contracts. So Bimal Patel comes into a very large problem now, and he wants to turn the entire institute around, which I think over the last 8 or 9 years, anybody who visits CEPT or talks to the students realizes that he's turned it around. So he asked me, why don't you design a new studio building and a lecture hall? So I thought, okay, let me put my first idea, not the final idea, in front of the students and faculty. We had a lovely presentation. In CEPT, there were people sitting on the floor, hanging from the ceilings. We had a great crowd of people, and I made a presentation. That was recorded, but it wasn't put on YouTube until, that was a Wednesday night, till Friday night. So you get Thursday morning, 8 or 9 people who were past students of CEPT, and a kind of a gang of guys, who were, I'm sorry to say, always trying to pull down what Dr. Bimal Patel was saying. So without even seeing my presentation, somebody clicked some pictures on their cell phone. They saw a few of those. They started writing rather nasty things about my design, which I thought was okay, because there were only about 9 of them. But you know, then 9 people, it starts going wild on the internet. Well, fortunately, what I did was then I put our design up on our site, on our Facebook site. Now, what happens on the net, instead of arguing with those people and using their names, I just put our project up on the site, and about 310,000 people looked at that site, looked at the drawings, even looked at a walkthrough, and 66,000 people said they liked the design. They even made comments. I got WhatsApp messages from people, and about 9 people did not like the design. 9 people didn't like them. And you know, on Facebook, you can see who those people are. You can just push the button and you can see. So at the end of the month, I had 30,000 more members on my Facebook from 170,000. I had 2 lakh followers. And I put up a joke. I said I would like to thank the 66,000 people who liked my design. And I would like to thank the 30,000 people who joined my Facebook site. But I said I would particularly like to thank the 9 people who didn't like it. Because I think controversy and debate is positive, it's constructive. And I think that because I knew that I had these 9 friends of mine out there waiting for me to flop, it made me a little more sincere and a little more hardworking. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But what happens if I look at some of the things that foreigners are writing about India, which are total nonsense, and it just creates a false image abroad of what's happening over here. Some of the comments they make about architects in India, I don't know if you're aware of those, but I think it's insulting to India, and it's unacceptable. So there's a lot of nonsense going on the web also, huge amount of nonsense, and a lack of a culture of intellect, a lack of talking constructively to try to look at problems and solve them. I think part of the question, maybe it's a different question that you wrote, I think people are spending way too much time on the net, way too much time on the internet, on videos, on Google, on WhatsApp. And you know, it annoys me when a senior architect has written me a message on WhatsApp, and then maybe I see it, they wrote it in the morning and I see it around 11 o'clock at night, and I just write back answering them, and in 10 seconds that double blue click comes, and I wonder what's going on. This guy writes me at 10 o'clock in the morning. I don't have time to look at my cell phone until 11 o'clock at night, and I answer the question, and bing bing, he's got the 2 blue lights. That there are people who are just living with their cell phone, waiting for people to send them a message on WhatsApp, and that means they're wasting their time. They're absolutely wasting their time, and they're getting involved in controversies. They're getting involved in debates, and all of these debates and controversies have nothing to do with them running their own office and making a contribution to society. So I think that it's very important that we put these things in its place. I must admit that we have a YouTube channel, and I would ask the students, you can look up our YouTube channel, and there's some lectures there. And we also have an Instagram going on, but that's not life. Some of the lectures on YouTube can be quite good. I would encourage people to see a lecture that I gave this year. I was honored to be the keynote speaker at the National Convention in February of the Sri Lanka Institute of Architects. And I think the lecture I gave there on social commitments of architecture is very important. So I would even encourage people to look at some YouTube talks. But basically, I think your question is, are we getting lost in the digital world? And I think the answer is yes. And maybe we have to start, each person has to say, I'll give 1 hour a day to my cell phone.
The reason why I had asked that question was also because of the many academicians have shared in this question, just as a continuation of it, that the social media is actually being very painful, or it's actually distracting students, is what they wrote. That is why we had framed it in a way that there's too much information. I feel that we have very little time in grabbing all this information, and it is not really helping us. But thank you, sir, for letting us know about the impact that you feel. And social media has always been driving, because the one of the academicians wrote, and I'm just quoting them as I say to you, that people are now, they want credit on social media rather than actually doing something. The number of likes and the number of followers and the number of things means so much that they have to spend their time. So like you said, if we can control the amount of time that you spend, and even I'm someone who's always on WhatsApp, and when you said the double tick, I think it was also something about me. So it's good. Yeah, it's actually relevant to spend time more efficiently. And there is a study that, yes,
I'll tell you, I think the real danger, let me take a simple thing like Art Daily. Now look at Art Daily. Look at some of the projects, I call them follies. Okay, take CC in TV in Beijing. These buildings actually can never be built in India. They have no social meaning. They're like jewels. They're like diamond tiaras that very wealthy people in New York and Paris wear. They're beautiful, they're innovative, they're unique, they're costly, but they have no impact on solving problems in India or most of the world. So what I find is that the social media, particularly the international social media, they're pushing particular styles and very fancy, expensive buildings, which have no relevance to India at all. And most of those architects, when they come to India, they flop. I don't want to use names, but a lot of well-known international architects have come over here, and they can't work with our workers, they can't do the tendering, and they do buildings which turn out not to be what was expected. No? And I think that social media is projecting images of architects which is not relevant. Our architects have to solve problems, and I think our architects are not here to make diamond jewelry for people to show off. We're here to do heavy problem solving, and I think as professionals in cities, we're working for our community, we're working for our cities, we're not working for Art Daily, our Design and one of these media generating kind of organizations. And I think what it does is it puts foreigners in control of our thinking. Young architects are thinking the way foreigners want them to think. They're thinking to do some very fancy upside down design and use some fancy materials and colors and do a Lumia walkthrough of it. And that's a beautiful design. And even faculty are pushing this kind of thing. And I think that's the danger to me, that we're actually living in a never world, designing things which have no relevance at all.
Sir, I think in just response to this, why do you think that on a global platform, Indian architects have not been able to do projects in a global level or being very renowned? There are few architects who are known for their work, but when foreign architects are able to come into India and do so many projects, why is it that we or the young generation is not getting inspired? Do you think that as and the modern Indian architecture, we haven't done much, or has it not been reached well? Why do you think the Indian platform has not been established well across the globe?
See, first of all, I don't agree with you. I don't agree that architects in New York City are doing better work than architects in India. I think that's absolutely patently wrong. I think architects in New York City have the media behind them, and they have the branding, and they have the salesmanship. And a lot of these companies send people over here who speak good English, and they're not even really architects, they're the marketing gang. And I've seen many, many firms come in from, say, New York, and they've actually had to fold up after some time because they come in and sell some very fancy pictures, but that's not really what is needed, you see. I mean, I really don't agree with you. I mean, you can take big firms like maybe Zaha Hadid and Norman Foster and Piano. I tried to get Piano in on a project here. It never really worked out, though they're really great guys and I love their work. But the fancy projects, you know, that are shown in magazines and on the web, done by these people, they frankly, the budgets are, you know, if we say a budget of 10,000 rupees a square foot is high in India, well, those are buildings that cost 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 rupees a square foot. Nonsense. We should not be building buildings like that. So I think all of us have got trapped in the beauty of these very expensive museums and opera halls and maybe railway stations now. And we say, well, we're not doing a good job over here. We're not doing that. Give us the same budget, give us the same amount of access to consultants, and we can easily do the same amount of work. I think we have great architects in India. We have great architects in Sri Lanka, better architects in Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, in India than you've got in New York and London and Paris. No? That's my opinion. And I think it's worth on another platform to carry that further. And let's look at some images of work being done by these, let's say, top 10 great architects of New York, Paris, and London. Let's put the pictures up and let's see what is really there. It's really a lot of money in facades, a lot of money in fancy kind of flooring, Italian marbles, which are totally, you know, there's no excuse for using that kind of material. And, you know, if somebody will design a spa in the mountains in Switzerland, and we all say, wow, isn't that poetic? It's so beautiful. Well, first of all, people in India don't spend, you know, $3,000 or $4,000 and go for a weekend spa. The second, all of those spas are irrelevant to our problem solving. The buildings themselves are beautiful, diamond rings, but we don't wear diamond rings all the time in India. And I don't think we should be building buildings like that. So I think we need to redefine what we call good architecture, relevant architecture, social architecture, and we'll see that none of these big name architects do social architecture. They're not solving any social problems. Could any of them solve the problem of housing in India? No. Can they solve the problem of rural healthcare in India? No. Can they do basic primary education facilities in India? No, and no, and no. And I think that we've got to get smart and stop watching just, you know, whatever it's called, Design Daily or Art Daily, and all these kind of websites and getting influenced because we're getting a wrong idea. That's not what architects do. Architects solve community problems in their own communities. So having said that, let's go to the next question.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So the next question is a very simple question. Christopher Benninger has become a brand. Yes or no?
See, all of us are brands. All of us are brands. But the first thing I want to say is Christopher Benninger is a name. And actually, it is a brand, but it's a brand of a team. One of my brand members is sitting behind me, Ram Prasad Akiseti. Dres Chokshi is part of the brand. Rahul Sati is part of the brand. Rahul Deshmukh is part of the brand. Shivaji Karkar is part of the brand. And even Noel Gerard is part of the brand, and so many others. Now, we have a team of people here who've been working 15 years to 25 years now. And we've worked on building a brand together because if people are going to pay an architect to do something, they need some confidence through an image they get, that they can visit, for example, India House, and they can have a look at our building and say, well, we would like something like this. We want this kind of professional quality. So I think brand building is very important for everyone. It's important for Balkrishna Doshi. It's important for Bimal Patel. It's important for friends in Bangalore. There's some great architects in Bangalore. And basically, I remember once Ram Prasad looks after our media, and he had put in one January, he had put some 34 magazines in a big table downstairs where either we were featured on the cover or there was an article and he had stuck a little blue piece of paper. And a friend of mine from Philadelphia came in for dinner and he walked around the studio and at dinner he said, why do you need to be in 35 or 30 magazines Why do you want to do that? So I said, listen, you have a great Philharmonic orchestra in Philadelphia, yes? He said, yes. I said, how many people play instruments in that? He said, about 80 people. And I said, well, we have about, if you take the people in the field on construction sites, it said we have about 50, 60 people. Now, would people go listen to the Philharmonic Orchestra in Philadelphia if they didn't have a brand image, if they weren't published in magazine? Would people spend $80 for a seat to go sit for 3 hours and listen to an orchestra that they didn't have any knowledge of? So I think musicians, actors, painters, architects, anyone in a creative field, they need branding. And that's why I would say youngsters in their competitions. You have so many good competitions right now. There are entries still being asked for from the Indian Institute of Architects. That's the most prestigious of all of the competitions in India. The most relevant is the Indian Institute of Architects competition every year. So I think that's important for branding. I think J.K. Cement Awards are very important for branding. And I think getting published is important. But see, to get published, you have to publish ideas. You're not selling lipstick or something. You need to have an interesting building that solves some kind of a problem, or you need to write. I haven't seen it, but I'm told that in the present issue of the Journal of the Indian Institute of Architects, there's an article on a discussion that I had with Kaiwan Mehta, who's the editor of Domus. So that's important because there's no pictures in that I know of. I mean, there could be some pictures just to create an interest, but basically it's what we're talking about that's important. So I think everybody should work on some kind of branding. In my studio, there are kids who are just 23 years old, but they've got branding. You know, somebody's great in doing 3D walkthroughs, and that guy's a brand in our studio. You've got a big client, and you say, well, only Bhargav can do the walkthroughs on that. He's the only guy who's a big shot in that. You want details of the building? Well, it's Shivaji Karakar. He's a branded guy in our office. He has a brand, you know? And some of the youngsters who have just come in, urban design students from SEPT, they can do things that other people can't do. So I think right from the time that you graduate and you come into a studio, you need some sort of an image, an identity. And believe me, architects need an identity. You cannot be an anonymous person in a crowd. So yes, I would say we are a brand, not me, but we. And it's very, very important for architects to use branding.
Thank you, sir. And I think now we've come to the last question, a question that is a personal question from myself. Who do you keep as your inspiration? Who is your inspiration, sir? Who do you get inspired from? Who is your inspiration?
You're not looking for one person, I think, are you?
No, not just one. It can be your inspiration. Where do you take your inspiration?
See, when I was a student, I had a teacher, which today nobody would remember his name. His name was Jose Luis Sert. Now, Sert was a practicing architect, a practicing town planner, and a practicing urban designer. In fact, very few people know that he invented the word urban design. He started the first urban design course at Harvard in 1956. And after that, urban design courses gradually spread all over the world. And everybody knows there's a field called urban design, but nobody knows who invented it. So Sert was one of these very ethical Spanish gentlemen who was a friend of Le Corbusier. They shared an office together in the 1930s. And he was very inspirational and very philosophical. But you know, today there are even young architects. In different ways, they inspire me. Like Kirti Shah does work with the poor people. He does housing and shelter for poor people all over India. In Pune, we have Sharad Mahajan who does that kind of work. These people inspire me. Bimal Patel inspires me because he's got the guts to take up a project where there's huge amount of chatter on the web. Some of it he's listening to, some of it's nonsense. But you know, he knows that we don't have enough space to put our central secretary. He knows that that we need to do this project. And I think he's got a lot of courage plus talent. He's one of the most talented people we have in the country. So I get inspired by young people. Doshi is always there. And I think everybody who's known Doshi, and I've worked very closely with him, he's lived in this house with me. I'm certainly inspired by people like Doshi. But there are a lot of young people Just last week, I went to an architect's new office in Pune, Benninger. Oh, that was so inspiring to me. It was one of the nicest offices I've ever seen in Paris, in New York, in London, even in India. I think it's a great thing. And when I see this kind of work that youngsters are doing in India, I really find it inspiring. And it makes me think, Benninger, you're 78, you better move your butt or you're going to get overtaken by these youngsters.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I think this is very, very fantastic. And we've actually come to the end of the session. And I wanted to ask if you have anything to share to the students and the academicians and the practicing architects, because you've shared, I think, a lot. We've covered different topics from social media to technology to your personal, inspiration. So we thought, yeah, it'll be right if you can also say a few words to the next generation.
Maybe I would say, go a little slower. Go a little slower. Most of the young people who come from my office, they have the secret agenda of going abroad and doing a master's degree and getting into a dead-end trap. I feel that a young architect should work for about 5 years for an architect who they have some respect for. Then they can think, do I want to do a master's degree to make myself a better professional in India? Or do I want to start my practice because I have some opportunity to build a building? They can think what to do. But I think people come out of a 5-year course, and the first thing they're thinking of, when can I go for the next 2-year course? And then they're losing track of their career. And I think the last thing you should all be doing is thinking of going abroad. We have very good schools of architecture teaching postgraduate degrees in Delhi, Bombay, Ahmedabad, Bangalore, and some great teachers also. We have some very devoted teachers. We have some equally bad teachers, but let's not characterize our profession by the bad guys. Let's characterize it by the good guys now. And I would say, stay in India. That's the word I have. Plan your life to be in your country and make a contribution to your country, and don't go make a contribution to my country. We don't need you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And it has been really a honor, and it's been overwhelming for me to have you and to be able to ask you all these questions. And we would definitely, I think as an institution, we ourselves have taken quite a lot of notes today from what you've said about internship and to social media and to the kind of teaching that we can do. And we would also like to invite you, if you come to Chennai, we would be very happy to have you in our center and be able to interact with students once anything, the pandemic and everything comes to a decent standstill. So thanks a lot for being a part of Future of Architecture and hosting and opening this day, sir.
It was an honor to be here, and I would like to thank you to be involved in this interaction. I hope that people could hear my voice clearly, and I enjoyed being with you. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. It was great. It was great. It was very clear and it was very audible, and I think it was also very intense and to the point. We have so much to take back, and thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, the entire brand and team of Christopher Charles Benninger Architects. Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Yes.